Hi, students. We've got this reading from the Triadic Heart of Shiva by Paul Mueller Ortega, a really great scholar whose thought is very careful and who understands his tradition deeply, the tradition of Tantra, and who understands Sanskrit deeply and is able to decipher texts from the medieval period related to important tantric scholars, the chief of which is a guy named Abhinavagupta, who, if you've done the reading, you've already encountered his name. This is a really deep reading that we're looking at, and I need to frame it a little bit historically so some of the concepts perhaps will become a little bit clearer. If we're looking at it from a time scale, and we're foreshadowing a little bit of our walk into yoga history here, but I think it's important to kind of frame where these ideas that Mueller Ortega is working with came from. We have the tantric movement, we might say, in India, starting to originate around the 4th, 5th century of the Common Era, and it integrates a lot of really new and radical ideas. By the time that Abhinavagupta comes around the year 1000, a lot of these ideas have become orthodox. They become regular mainstream practice for the Indian people in many of the kingdoms there. It's still kind of an atomized country. India's geopolitical history is very mixed. It's rarely unified by any large kingdom. But it was settled enough in certain kingdoms for amazing scholarship to advance itself. And in this meditative work that these scholars did, because they weren't just scholars, they were scholar practitioners. They wouldn't have been able to have the insights that they had. They started to realize different things about the human body and the universe, and what we need to understand about Tantra, as opposed to the earlier period, the period kind of before the time of the birth of Christ, when we had the Upanishads and the work we get in the Yoga Sutras, which actually comes about a little bit later, as far as the 4th century Common Era, just at the dawn of the Tantric era, is that material looked at the world very skeptically, looked at the world very negatively, we might say, looked at the world with an idea that karma was a little bit oppressive and it had to be dealt with seriously. And so this body was problematic, and desire was problematic. We get that very much from the Buddhist tradition, and that fed into the larger mainstream of Hindu ideas and Hindu practices, which were mainly a part of India. Though Buddhism really throve, it really elaborated itself right through the Tantric era, and there was a lot of dialogue. But these initial ideas from Buddhism were a little bit restrictive, and we even had a lot of that from the set of Vedic ideas, that this body was a dirty place, very much like the Victorian ideas that we get in England in the 1800s, that it was problematic, sex was problematic, and the whole idea was to get out of the body and to actually get out of this world. This world was kind of a lousy place. But when we get into the Tantric era, that reasoning is reversed according to some, I don't know if they were merely intellectual breakthroughs, but they were definitely spiritual breakthroughs, because they had to do with embracing this world, seeing this world as a positive thing, very much aligned with modern thinking, where we embrace this life. We don't look to get out of this life. We don't look so far as to what's happening after death. In fact, we're a bit afraid of it. We celebrate this life. We celebrate the body. We celebrate our humanity and our achievements. And so this kind of starts to come into the Indian ken. It starts to come into the Indian understanding. And a whole range of concepts are put into play in the religious imagining of the Indian people, because the religious imagining is the main imagining of this culture. It's very much focused on transcendence. And in this reading that we have, we encounter some of those ideas that have to do with the nature of the universe, and they're really beautiful ideas. And they definitely relate to the body. And the chief one I want to kind of point to in this talk is this idea of Spanda, this idea of vibration. We've already touched on this a little bit with some of the reading excerpts we've had. And I showed you that lately come into being idea that physics is developing around the nature of empty space and how material comes into being and drops out of being. And this is key to this idea of Spanda, because this idea of Spanda from the Tantric tradition is that reality vibrates, it tessellates, it has this kind of shimmering quality. And this is at the base level of the interaction between nothingness and somethingness, something that was foreshadowed in our earlier talk around the tattvic ideas, the ideas from the Yoga Sutras, the ideas from the Samkhya philosophy around Purusha and Prakriti. Tantra moves forward with a set of the same basic ideas, that there is nothingness and somethingness, but there's a greater understanding of their interpenetration, which is much more aligned with the sexual theology of the tradition, which you also encounter in this reading from Paul Mueller-Ortega. This idea that the universe reflects the sexual union of Shiva and Shakti. Shiva, the male principle, which stands for consciousness, stands for the emptiness, and then Shakti, which stands for the power principle, the principle of materiality, the principle of Prakriti, if we're going to transmute that back to the Samkhyan ideas of philosophy. We've still got the two basic polarities, but now there's a more elaborated idea of how they interact in nature, as well as in terms of the spiritual expression of humanity. This isn't a world, well, it is a world. We always do deal with the kind of profane nature of sexuality, but this starts to transform itself a great deal in these tantric ideas and even tantric practices, where sexuality is deeply embraced, profoundly embraced, and it's embraced even as a method towards transcendence. The union of Shiva and Shakti, of male and female, is seen as profoundly holy, and even in the sexual act, there is a profound opportunity to break through orgasmic states, into a lived experience of the profundity of the depths of reality. It's no longer seen as problematic. Oh, sex is going to just take us into this place of pleasure and confusion and kind of screening out of the profundity of reality, but rather it'll take us right into that place. And so it relates all the way back. There's this beautiful set of correspondences or consistency in the Indian philosophies as they move right through their ideas of psychology and body and into what we relate to modern physics. All of that is kind of a seamless connection of the understanding of the nature of reality. So this idea of Spanda is also an idea of sexuality. It's also an idea of psychology. There's this constant interplay of manifestation and destruction, because Shiva is the destructive principle. In the Tantric tradition, he kind of becomes all. He's both the destructive principle and the creative principle, and he's assigned a whole range of powers that have to do with his capacity to both destroy and create. But this tessellating quality that we see even in the modern physics view of things coming into being and things dropping out of being is seen as a basic quality of the universe that is described in this vibratory word that we call Spanda. There's a whole set of other concepts that come into play too, and we'll talk about those when we get more into the historical section. But I just wanted to kind of frame that a little bit in historical context, because we encountered in Ortega's reading, and hope to give it a little bit of context so that when you encounter that term and other terms around oscillation, the kind of bursting forth of the universe and the dropping back of the universe, which is very much like Big Bang Theory, though that's elaborated in a slightly different way in modern physics, because they're not so sure that things are going to go back and destroy. They have to figure that out. But in the Hindu tradition, they believe that the universe invented itself and destroyed itself. So there's these larger oscillations that happen. There's these larger vibrations that happen of all of creation being created and all of it being destroyed. And that relates to this whole idea of creation as it comes through the human body. I've got to end this. I've got 10 minutes is almost coming up. Hope that was a nice primer. Namaste.